You have the moderates and you have the lunatics. And I think the moderates are more respected. The lunatics want to fight till the end. It'll be a very quick fight. But I call them. You have, just like our country, we have lunatics too. I call them lunatics. I call them stupid people too. But in Iran, they have the moderates that are dying to make a deal, and then you have the lunatics, and I guess they're a little bit afraid of the lunatics, but and why not? The level of ferocity for protests. The people are watching it. They want to go out on the streets. They have no weapons. They have no guns.
President Trump from the Oval Office talking about the back and forth with Iran, the lunatics, or as he calls them, when they're American, he calls them stupid people. I don't have a problem with that. I want to get to our guest. Katie Pavlich joins us. Excited to have the primetime host, of course, Katie Pavlich, tonight on NewsNation, which you can watch here Central Time at 9 o'clock. Katie, welcome back to the show. Thanks for the time this afternoon.
Thanks for having me, Annie. Great to be on your show.
Well, I appreciate that. I want to know your sentiments as a broadcaster, somebody covering this. I personally don't want to come onto my show every day because every other day it seems to be a different story. Okay, we're going back to Project Freedom. Now maybe there's a ceasefire. I trust this administration. I think that what they're doing is a righteous endeavor. I almost feel as though there might be too much information coming out, but that's probably because I don't understand it. What's your assessment of how this administration is handling the moment and communicating it?
Well, I think that strategic patience is an important thing when you are trying to take out a nuclear program that has threatened the world for many, many years, and a regime that was developed and has been in place to destroy and kill Americans for 47 years. And so I understand that people are confused and they may be frustrated with the lack of consistent information, but when you're dealing with military operations, you're not going to know the full story until it's over. And so, the president, I believe, is being strategically hard to pin down. He's being unpredictable on purpose. And of course, he can't tell, publicly what his plans are, because that would limit his ability to be strategic against the Iranian regime, which of course is refusing to cooperate and do what the United States is asking them to do in terms of giving up their nuclear program, allowing us to come in and get the uranium. If you look at the things that have been happening and the military assets that have been moved into the region during the ceasefire, there are now 3 aircraft carriers there. There's a nuclear submarine that just arrived in Gibraltar today. So I think if you look at that, there may be something bigger coming. But of course, the president never, projects what he's going to do for the reasons of wanting to, have the best strategic options against the enemy. So, he has said repeatedly that he understands that there's frustration at the pump, but he believes, and he said this multiple times consistently, that this will be a short-term pain for the long-term gain of solving this problem for future generations, rather than, leaving it on the table for another person or president to either deal or not deal with. So I think he's pretty clear on that. And at the same time, he sent out his political operatives who are doing a pretty good job when it comes to the economy, to this redistricting fight that we're seeing across the country. So I think they have all the bases covered, but I understand why people are a little confused about the back and forth and the lack of additional action. But I think that people just need to be a little bit more patient.
Yeah, Katie, I think too that we're not a news cycle culture that has any sense of patience whatsoever. None. You're talking about strategic patience. Let's just talk about any patience. We want it. We want it now, and we want to fight over it. And to me, watching some of the arguments and criticisms against this administration for the actions that they're taking in, you cannot criticize this administration for not trying to negotiate, to use words instead of missiles and bombs. And I'm not just talking about the last, 2 months. President Trump has been so incredibly consistent for decades and decades that he has no tolerance for Iran having a nuclear bomb. He's been consistent. He's pretty much begged and pleaded, have some common sense here. And they have no interest in listening to reason.
Well, and like you said, we live in a time where everybody thinks that things can happen overnight, and it's just not the reality of dealing with a problem of this size and managing the logistics of an operation like this and having it be successful. And the worst thing I think that could happen now that this has started is to leave early, to leave without finishing the job, without finishing truly the objectives, because, then we'll have to be A, dealing with it again, and B, Iran is a regime that becomes emboldened by things like that, because they then use that as fuel to continue, their anti-American stance and to pursue their nuclear program and their terrorism across the globe. So, the president started this 4 months ago. I 100% understand why people are concerned about wars in the Middle East. We were in Afghanistan for 20 years, for I would say at least half of it we were lied to by the Pentagon about the status of that war. But being 4 months into an operation is a very small period of time when it comes to what the objectives are. And so we'll just have to wait and see. We're not going to get the detailed information that we want until it's actually happening or it's over. So, journalists can look for it, but there's, of course, the problem of putting assets and military personnel in danger if you publish too much information about what's actually going on, because it gives the enemy the advantage. So it's a difficult scenario if you really want more information, and I think people are entitled to it eventually, but right now the military and the president are trying to make the best decisions that are successful, because there are lives on the line. This isn't just people arguing on X over strategy. There are actual consequences to making the wrong decision.
Yeah, all the front porch bros monitoring the situation from their X account.
Right, exactly.
It's a nice place, nice comfy place to be. Primetime host of Katie Pavlich tonight on NewsNation, 9 p.m. Central Time for your viewing pleasure. Katie Pavlich speaking with us right now. I've heard the president say this. I've heard other, experts that come on my show, they're military folks, talk about the difference between, winning the military strategy, but then also, of course, winning the peace that comes after it. I also think that we have to understand and measure what peace actually might look like here. I don't think that we're going to finally get the group of Iranians who come together who we can trust to handle the situation. Here's what we want you to do. And they're like, thumbs up. Okay, let's go. What does it look like from a perpetual standpoint once peace is achieved? How do you anticipate, what do you want to see at least that look like?
Well, you have to remember that, the Abraham Accords, which happened during the first term, were the big first step in this process to move the entire region forward. The only country that is continuing to cause problems, to fund terrorism, to launch missiles is Iran, and their proxy groups, which have now been largely devastated, but are still operating in places like southern Lebanon and in the Gaza Strip. So the goal is to form this coalition that includes, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, even potentially Qatar, even though they have their problems with continuing to fund terrorism as well and have been an ally to Iran in many senses. The goal is to move the entire region forward into a modern age of business and commerce and economy. And, Mohammed bin Salman, who's the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, knows this. He's been dying to do this. He's been trying to move his country forward into the modern age. The population there wants to move forward outside of just being an oil-rich country. They want to have a real economy that is in the modern world. And so Iran's the only remaining problem and impediment to that. So, it's up to these other Gulf states as well, and Arab states, to step up and kind of police their own backyard. The United States, of course, has the ability to do this with the Israeli military, but the neighboring countries as well have to step up and do this. And I think there's a lot of pressure on them right now to do that. You've seen statements from the UAE, of course, saying that this needs to, the United States should not leave. They should finish the job because we cannot tolerate a neighbor who behaves like this. And they aren't just saying it in, anonymous sourcing in the New York Times. They're coming out with these statements through their ambassadors, which is a huge, huge step forward in terms of the region. So I think that that's the direction in the future. Once Iran and their terrorism can be subdued, at least, there's no longer a nuclear threat, a nuclear hostage taking in the region because they're continuing to pursue their program. Then the entire region can move forward in an economic fashion and be civilized in the modern world. But unfortunately, Iran has always tried to stop that.
Now, Katie, you've listed a whole host of specific details that when people think about forever wars, and we've been here and we've tried to do this, there are a lot of facts that are involved in this moment in time, really, that have been laid in the groundwork to this moment with Iran, this administration in his first term and following up in his second term, that this is not status quo Middle East conflict, forever war. There are a lot of elements that are very different about this moment.
Well, and, the administration has been very clear from the beginning that one of their main objectives is not regime change. That was an objective for the Israelis, and it would be nice. The administration has said, yes, of course, it would be nice if this regime would fall. And, a lot of people would argue that if you're truly trying to move that country forward, you can't have a regime still in place that continues to pursue a nuclear weapon at all costs. But they're not advocating for democracy. They're not. They would like it. They would, of course, love for the Iranian people to have their freedom and to live in a democracy, to live in the post-1970s world before the Iranian regime, the Islamic colonizers came into that country and took it over and took our embassy workers hostage, Americans, and then going on for years and years and killing hundreds of Americans and maiming hundreds more in Iraq and Afghanistan. But the president's been very clear that his objectives are in the U.S. interests. And of course, he has a lot of heart for humanity and for the Iranian people. And it would be the best overall if they could have a pro-American democracy in Iran. But he's also acknowledged many times the reality that we're dealing with an unarmed population. Operations to arm people don't always go so well. So that's not one of our objectives. If it were to happen, great. But the main objectives are to stop the nuclear program and to subdue the regime in a way that the region can move forward into the modern age with civilized society.
Katie, before we let you go, got anything lined up for tonight? Sometimes those things are right up to the very last minute. I know.
Yeah, we're watching the news. We'll have an update on Iran, of course, and we'll have a couple other things in the show as well. But we're still just kind of watching to see what the day brings, and then we'll have a full lineup for you at 10 o'clock Eastern, 9 p.m. Central on NewsNation.
We'll be watching. Katie Pavlich, thank you again for the time. It's always nice to talk to you.
Thank you so much. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.